a problematic area of human capital in high tech, which we put a lot of emphasis, from the CEO level in the authority, and all of us are really involved in how do we break the mold here. How do we bring more good people to the industry? The industry is striving. We have to jump from 10% to 15% in nothing in really relatively no time.
Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Just sit back, relax, and learn from the leaders of today. It's a journey. Each one is different, unique, inspiring. Let's get started. This episode is powered by J Ventures, a community-driven VC fund in Silicon Valley in partnership with Leumi Tech, sponsored by Homeward Ventures, Hippo Insurance, Upwest Labs, Synergy Global, Hillel at Stanford, Leap, Birthright Excel, Serona Partners, and in media partnership with C-Tech. Welcome to another episode of 20-Minute Leaders. Let's talk about innovation and government put together. Meet Karina Rubinstein, Director of Business Development, Startup Division, Israel Innovation Authority. Karina is a Senior Director of Business Development at the Israel Innovation Authority and has a vast experience in helping Israeli startups and companies build innovation strategies and their global presence. Karina Rubinstein, welcome to 20-Minute Leaders from the Israel Innovation Authority. How are you?
I'm fine, Michael. Thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity. I'm really happy to be here.
Thank you so much, both for you being here, but also for the great work that you're doing, because, I get to speak with a lot of entrepreneurs and investors, a lot from Israel as well on this show, being Israeli myself. And finally, I get to understand, there's a larger umbrella to everything that we're doing here. It's something called the Startup Nation, this high-tech ecosystem, which we are all so happy to be a part of. And then there's the Israel Innovation Authority, which is this body that you will tell me in a second a little bit more about what it does. But essentially, I can tell you from the entrepreneur perspective, it's the sense of there's this body in Israel that is here to support the ecosystem and help Israel both grow as an ecosystem, but help also individual startups succeed on their own. And so very excited to have you here running business development for the organization. Karina, tell me a little bit about yourself and how do you perceive your role within this ecosystem?
Well, I joined the authority 4 years ago, so I come from the industry, actually. I was more than 20 years doing business development for startups, basically for startups. I'm a startup person, so, we have a joint thing. And I was actually helping startups in the stage that they were, starting to do something, and there was nothing there really. I assume the situation, the stage. We were, trying to build platforms in international markets for these startups, gaining market traction and all of that. So actually, through my years, the experience were piling up, and now what I bring to the table in the authority is actually, a really vast experience in all kinds of verticals. So I moved technologically, you bring your skill sets at the end of the day. What you do in trying to connect and trying to broaden the opportunities or seize the opportunities, you can look at it from various angles. But at the end of the day, this is what you bring. It doesn't really matter if you move from medical device to media to agtech to digital health. There's a span of it, but in the end of the day, that's what I was doing, and actually all of that I brought to the authority. So basically, someone told me this morning, you are like the Disneyland of opportunities in the authority, because really. And I think myself and the team that I'm part of, we all look at how do we create more impact? How do we help the industry? How do we translate your needs into something practical that we can be of help there, have good solutions. So that's, in a nutshell.
Israel Innovation Authority as a body. We're combining the words authority, innovation, and Israel. Three things that, each of them alone could be, it's so many different things. What happens when you put these three words together? What does it mean, the Israel Innovation Authority as a body?
Yeah. daily struggling, but yeah, but the idea was there 5 years ago. We were basically back then the chief scientist in the Ministry of Economy for years, and that was an establishment by itself. We helped quite a lot. The idea that the government of Israel is committed to investment in innovation over the years, it started back then, I think in the 70s or so, and then went through establishing the VC industry. You were talking back, before about yourself and your involvement in the venture capital. There was nothing here in the beginning of the 90s. So the government of Israel actually created this kind of an infrastructure for then on startups to be created. Back then there were several big, companies like high-tech companies and nothing other than that. So I think
Is this
the
common
government
around the world to have governments creating unique positions within the government to support a startup innovative ecosystem?
I think it's part of the DNA here. We had delegations before the corona, I think 400 people per week coming from around the world to see what is it all about? How does this model working? So they are trying to duplicate it, but then at the end of the day, you need the DNA, you need a culture mindset, in a sense. So it all combines together at the end of the day. But I think we are now trying fast forward 5 years that we are operating as an independent authority. We are trying to do extensively much, much more than what we, been able to do as a government ministry. So our operation is much wider today. We have relatively big budget, like something like $500 million a year, and all of that goes to support the industry. All of that. If we were struggling now at the end of this 21 year, we were struggling to move the last penny to the industry at the last day. So really, we were trying our best to do more and more each year. Looking at what we are doing, it's enormous. Really, it's enormous. It's really on a large scale.
And I have quite a few portfolio companies that I'm personally involved with who've been receiving grants from the Israel Innovation Authority, and they go from medical technology all the way to deep technology, looking at investigating neural networks. And I keep thinking to myself, like, wow, what is this crazy body that is matching our investments and is basically doubling the investment round that some of these companies in the pre-seed and seed stages are getting? What is the model here? Are you a venture capitalist? Are you an advisor? What is the day-to-day like of the Israel Innovation Authority?
Well, that's a good question. But I can say that we are a major investor in the industry, non-equity though,
yes, non-equity, right?
Yeah, non-dilutive. That has to be said. But we do look at unlike venture capitalists or investors, be whoever they are, we are supporting from applied research in the academia or commercializing IP from the academia, and then singular entrepreneurs, with only an idea in their head, early stage startups, companies at growth, manufacturing companies, the human capital in high tech. So we're looking at holistically, how do we create a stronger ecosystem here in Israel? It's not only how do we support startups per se in a specific area, because we are agnostic to the vertical that you are, as long as you are innovative and disruptive. And that's what we are looking at primarily. I mean, we nowadays trying to focus our our resources in areas where the private market is not there. So I think our impact is where there's a scarcity of private market. Investors wouldn't go so much into, I was a previous call that I have before you, someone from the water technology area, and he was saying there's not enough investment here. Foreign investors are not here, are not present, although Israel is known in the world for their water technologies, for its water technologies. So we are the only, we are with all kinds of other ones, but majority of the support coming from us to these kinds of areas, and they are really highly important now. Looking at the climate, change and all of that, it's really important to have these kinds of cutting edge technologies in Israel. So we're looking at where it's turning to be highly risky. We are there. We are there,
I love
and
it.
of course, wherever we can spread the infrastructures that VCs wouldn't invest in infrastructure for you companies to work on. So whatever relates to incubators, innovation labs, other kinds of research institutes that we can provide the meaning for their infrastructures for you companies to work with. So these are the areas that our budget is really focused in the last years more and more.
Now, the Israel Innovation Authority is a governmental body, right?
Right.
Startups are used to dealing with the government in not necessarily the same optimistic grant-like manner that they might be interacting with the Israel Innovation Authority, not just in terms of the relationship often between government and the businesses of the country, but also in terms of the dialogue and the forms that you have to fill out and the long processes. How do you gauge through mitigating that difference? And that is the dissonance between the governmental side, the innovation side, and the entire ecosystem as a whole.
I think, part of the reason that people like myself are in the authority is for us to be more proactive and more reachable for the industry. And I think we are trying to translate it into informal relationship on a daily basis. I'm really communicated with whoever on my WhatsApp all the time, all the day, in unusual hours as well. And this is why I'm here. I'm here to do that exactly. I think 90% of the people in the authority nowadays, we are I think around 140 people. 90% of us are coming from the industry,
Wow.
So you're not looking at the government organization as it is, used to be perceived years back, without offending anyone, in the other ministries. All of my colleagues really are fine people trying to do whatever they can to push forward. But I do think that we understand the complexities and we're trying to do differently. So we are struggling ourselves sometimes with things that, the system is working in a different way. And, we're trying to push walls. We succeed most of the time, I have to say.
Karina, what is your day-to-day look at the Israel Innovation Authority running their business development? What is your day-to-day look?
I think, I would say around 80% of it is talking with the industry, meeting with the industry, trying to solve whatever I can, trying to facilitate whatever I can, trying to have my 2 cents contributing in things that are not related specifically to our funding tools per se. I bring whatever I can to help the industry. So this is more or less I think a generic day of mine. But other than that, we're trying to translate whatever we hear into workable channels or workable tools. So this is another 20-30% or more than that.
And so spending 80% talking to the industry and coming from the industry, where are we at right now? We've just opened 2022. Israel is in an incredible boom with a scale-up nation, not just a startup nation. I feel the energy and I feel the progression that we're making on a daily basis. I'm seeing entrepreneurs that are more mature and are thinking bigger, with greater visions than what I believe we've had before as an ecosystem. How do you perceive where we're at now, and where do you think we're headed in the next few years?
Well, first of all, we see a trend of more experienced entrepreneurs coming back, like, like what you described before, to Israel, opening new companies. And so the trend of, someone asked me a few days ago, what is the exit strategy? As I was saying, maybe not an exit strategy, that will be the strategy in a sense, but establishing companies here, established companies, and this is a trend that we would like to strengthen more and more. I think by that we can really build a strong industry at the end of the day. And that's where we're heading to. And I think the other pain that we see is the problematic area of human capital in high tech, which we put a lot of emphasis, from the CEO level in the authority, and all of us are really involved in how do we break the mold here. How do we bring more good people to the industry? The industry is striving, we have to jump from 10% to 15% in nothing, in really relatively no time, and not in a generic way. So how do we bring more people to the industry? More people, by the way, not only programmers or so, which is really really common, and that's another problem, data science and all of that. But what we see is a really strong trend of people like coming from, biz dev, sales and marketing, these kinds of areas. So myself, looking back, in my own personal experience, and no one taught that back then. There were really a few companies that were hiring people in Israel to do so. Usually we were dependent on the US for that. But now what you see is a different kind of a trend. And I think that couples with a lot, with people making aliyah from all around the world and bringing on, a very good knowledge in foreign languages and culture, mind, and so on. They know how to move around with these skill sets. And that is very good for the industry. So beyond doing only R&D here, that is a very good formula to form here, a full companies, a complete companies. And that's what I think these are two of the things that are really, moving around here in the authority very much. We're putting a lot of emphasis on that. I would say on the other hand, millennials have their own mindset, and it's a good thing, because they're looking at how they create impact, not only do the job. And I think moving these people from only writing a code to writing a code with an impact is also a trend that we see, and we would like to strengthen it. So I'm talking with a lot of entrepreneurs and people that only finished the army, finished the university or whatever. They're looking at how to move on to areas that are dealing with food tech, climate tech, these kinds of areas, and health. And I think it's really important to encourage them, to give them, to facilitate that for them.
What is top of mind for you now? So when you're going to sleep tonight, what is keeping you up, or what is sort of your top priority as you see it in your role today?
How do we tend more for the periphery of Israel? How do we create more high-tech there? Not, by the way, just by shortening the time to, traveling time between the periphery to the center of Israel necessarily, but how do we create ecosystems there? It's really something of, it's part of my passion. Really, I have a personal involvement in that. And how do we create more, how do we bring more underrepresented populations in high tech to the high tech? So we do a lot of activity this year around Arabs, entrepreneurs, Arabs in high tech, and so on. Women, we would like to see more women entrepreneurs. And also the Haredic population. So we do a lot of activities around that. We are not, we haven't succeeded in moving the needle so much. It's sadly I'm saying that it's something that we put a lot of thinking into. So these two subjects more or less revolving around my
Karina,
minds.
thank you so much for your time, not just here, but in the Israel Innovation Authority. And I'm astounded by the numbers that you shared with me before. $500 million of budget to contribute to the ecosystem. And now it's starting to make sense why I'm seeing all these incredible companies that are getting these non-dilutive grants from the Israel Innovation Authority. So, and what's also really amazing to me, you're saying that 90% of the people working in the authority are actually from the industry. And I think this is exactly the idea behind why you're able to forge the gap from the government to innovation and under the umbrella of an ecosystem is by also bringing the ecosystem into the government. And now I can understand it much better. So thank you very much for your time, and stay safe and stay healthy.
Thank you so much, Michael.